Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's program on what to expect from APEC 2025, Fostering Sustainable Prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region. I'm Scott Snyder. I'm President and CEO of KAI, and we're pleased to welcome a large audience, especially online, for our Scene Setter program in advance of the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting scheduled for October 31st and November 1st in Gyeongju, South Korea. And we're very pleased to be hosting this event with the National Center for APEC, led by Monica Hardy-Whaley, who is also a panelist there on screen and whom I will introduce shortly. I also just want to mention that KEI is hosting a few events coming up. Next Monday, October 20th at 10 a.m., we're having an event on the Lee Jae-myung administration's regional diplomacy with China and Japan, which is not targeted at APEC, but will obviously be relevant to APEC. And we're also going to be posting a conversation later this week in our video podcast series, Eye on Korea, with Matt Goodman, who has had a long association and involvement with APEC. Before I introduce the panelists for today's discussion, I just want to offer a few framing remarks. First, I think that today's discussion of APEC provides a classic challenge of distinguishing between event and process. Everyone is anticipating the convening of the political and business leaders in South Korea, but it's inevitable that and it's inevitable that press attention will be drawn to those events, but this is also the culmination of an 11-month-long process through which Korea has been sharing a whole series of events related to APEC. And that process has been going on since the handoff that occurred from the leaders' meeting that was held last year in Peru. And so there's been numerous meetings involving senior members of the bureaucracies from the 21 APEC members. And I just think that it's remarkable that this process was going on in the context of impeachment, political paralysis, and the election of a new leadership in South Korea. And so, for instance, USTR Jameson Greer met many of his APEC counterparts for the first time at an APEC trade ministerial meeting in Jeju last May, right at the same time as South Korea's presidential election was going on. Also, I just want to offer a few fun facts about APEC and Korea. I learned in my research that the idea for APEC was initially proposed by former Australian Prime Minister Bob Hawke at a speech in Seoul in January of 1989, so South Korea can claim to be the birthplace, at least for the public voicing of the idea of APEC. Also, a lot of Korean diplomats claim a critical role in bringing Taiwan and Hong Kong into the forum alongside China back in 1991, and I think that's another unique aspect, is that APEC is an organization of member economies, not necessarily member states. And then also South Korea, this is their second time hosting APEC, following the inaugural hosting role in 2005 in Busan. And I believe that there is still an APEC pavilion near Haeundae Beach in Busan, which is where the 2005 leaders' meetings were held. So Korea's been deeply involved in this process from its inception. Now I just want to turn to some introductions of panelists for today's event. We've passed out their full bios, and so I just want to introduce them briefly. Monica Hardy-Whaley on screen is the president of the National Center for APEC based in Seattle. Go Mariners, I guess. Monica has been with the National Center for APEC since the U.S. hosted APEC in Seattle in 1993, and with the National Center playing many roles in support of U.S. hosting of private sector participation also in the 2023 U.S. hosted APEC process in San Francisco. Monica is not only our co-sponsor, but also our knowledge partner and subject matter expert for today's event, and we're grateful for her participation. And then here on stage with me, we have two individuals. To my immediate left, Sarah Ahn is the economic minister at the Embassy of the ROK to the United States here in Washington since last year. And prior to that, served as Director General for the Economic Affairs Bureau at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where she coordinated South Korea's involvement in APEC issues. And she's been intimately involved in watching Korea's APEC preparations and in U.S.-Korea trade consultations with the U.S. government for many years. And this is Sarah's second time to join us on stage here at KEI, so we're very grateful for her presence. And then also to her left, Ambassador Kurt Tong, managing partner at the Asia Group and formerly a U.S. government official intimately involved for many years with U.S. economic policy, including as U.S. ambassador for APEC in 2011. And I noticed on your bio, Kurt, that you claim involvement in the design of both the TPP and Chorus FTA, despite apparent U.S. disinterest in both of those mechanisms, but that's okay. I first met Kurt when he was economic counselor at the U.S. Embassy in Seoul over 20 years ago, and so we're absolutely thrilled to have you, Kurt, today. And then finally, we had hoped to have Casey Mace, U.S. senior official for APEC from the State Department today, but unfortunately his participation is a casualty of the U.S. government shutdown. So we're going to soldier on despite his inability to join. And I want to start our discussion today with a question for Ms. Whaley about the theme of APEC, building a sustainable tomorrow, connect, innovate, and prosper, and whether or not you see this, at least thematic title, as indicative of the main policy issues that have been at the focus of APEC's work this year, and what do you think the challenges are that will face APEC in the remaining meetings as we culminate in hopefully a joint statement at the leaders' meeting? Over to you, Monica.
Oh, sorry, and I'm just having a little trouble hearing you.
Okay.
Would you mind repeating the question, just the heart of it?
The question is essentially, what do you think are the thematic advancements that we should be expecting as we come to the culmination of the process for this year's APEC?
I turned the closed caption on and it came through as a completely different question, so I'm really glad I asked you to repeat it.
Okay.
So, thank you. Well, you know, as you said in your opening scene setter, Scott, this has been a really challenging year to take on APEC for Korea itself because of internal challenges and political changes. But also because of the world and what's changed in the world of trade over the last year. As you mentioned, Ambassador Greer went into the early May, I think it was early May, maybe mid-May, APEC trade ministers meeting very shortly after President Trump announced the first round of tariffs. And it was very challenging time. And I think it was a really opportune time for the senior U.S. trade person to be in Jeju with his fellow ministers and able to have conversations about that. And I think that's one of the things that APEC really brings to the fore. It's because of its ongoing nature throughout the year, it allows those kinds of ongoing conversations that I think are really critical to keeping things forward. The Koreans have chosen, I think, very wisely to focus on a couple of things in their year, and we can talk a little bit more later, I think, about the outcomes. But their focus on AI and digital, and in fact, the hosting of the very first APEC digital ministers meeting was held in August, and that was a groundbreaking kind of activity. And then they're also pairing that with the complementary issue, I think, of demographic change. And that's something that all of the APEC economies are facing. So I think actually those two things, despite what are the differences between the APEC economies and what everybody has going on with tariffs and discussions and various things, I think it's really exciting to have APEC on the cusp of those two issues, which are really going to shape the region as we go forward.
Okay. And I want to return to those, but I also want to ask about the CEO Summit, and in particular about the National Center for APEC's involvement and support for that summit, because that's always an event that gets a lot of attention.
Well, that's a unique feature of APEC, really. That the CEO Summit happens right alongside the leaders meeting, and in the best of all possible worlds, those two events happen very, very close together. And this year, in the intimate setting of Jeongju, Korea, they will be within just sort of very, very close distances to one another. So we're hoping and expecting that the agenda for the CEO Summit will feature many remarks by leaders. And that's always an exciting moment. And it gives us an opportunity to put the APEC CEO Summit next to leaders and to have those kinds of discussions on economic issues. This year's CEO Summit will be, as said, in just nearby the APEC leaders meeting activities. And they have 3 days worth of activities, and I'm happy to go through them and dive in. They're covering all kinds of issues. They've added a day to the program so that it really is a tour of the horizon of all of the APEC, or of all the economic issues facing the globe and the region. It's going to be a very interesting meeting.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that. I want to turn to Sarah now and ask about Korea's perspective on preparations for the APEC meetings, and how Korea has tried to leave its own stamp. And I guess Monica's already gotten part of the way into it, but I'd be interested in how it looks from your perspective.
Okay, so over the last 3 decades, APEC serves as the premier economic forum for Asia-Pacific region, its economic growth and prosperity. Korea's own economic growth has benefited greatly from APEC's values like trade investments, the innovation and sustainable and inclusive growth. We're proud to host APEC once again this year under the theme of building a sustainable future. This theme reflects our commitment to deepening understanding of common challenges, strengthening cooperation, and realizing the Putra Vision 2040 for an open, dynamic, resilient, sustainable, peaceful Asia-Pacific. I often joke about this long, catchphrase because I was in the room negotiating this catchphrase back in 2020 in Malaysia year, and then I didn't expect myself repeating it over and over the years. To translate this vision into action, we've set 3 priorities: connect, innovate, prosper. First, connect. We want to build a more open, resilient region by deepening physical, institutional, and people-to-people exchange. That means maintaining, strengthening a trade and investment environment that's free, open, fair, non-discriminatory, predictable, and transparent, which is an increasingly important goal amid today's global economic uncertainties. Second, innovate. We're focusing on how innovation and digitalization can enhance our region's competitiveness while addressing the digital divide and creating inclusive technology ecosystem. We're highlighting the transformative role of AI and working with members on a framework for collaboration to ensure everyone benefits from these changes. Third, prosper. We aim to respond to common challenges like energy security, climate change, public health, and food security, while ensuring sustainable and inclusive growth. We've also introduced demographic change as a new area for APEC discussion, as pointed out Monica earlier, given its deep impact on labor, social cohesion, and long-term growth. These priorities will guide discussions at the upcoming APEC Economic Leaders meeting at the end of this month. We prepared 2 sessions for leaders, respectively on October 31st and November 1st. The first session is on towards a more connected, resilient region and beyond, where leaders will discuss how we can work together to promote trade investments in the region and ensure we remain closely connected, and also how we can foster public-private collaboration and unlock the full potential of private sector. The second session is on preparing a future-ready Asia-Pacific, where leaders will discuss how we can prepare for the future and how APEC can empower and strengthen the capacity of all economic actors to adapt to these changes. Also, as pointed out by Scott and Monica earlier, since APEC drives on public-private collaboration, we're also hosting major business events like the APEC Dialogues with Leaders and CEO Summit, bringing together top global and regional companies to drive real economic outcomes and stronger partnerships across the region.
And Kurt, you're in a little bit of an awkward position because of the government shutdown and the fact that you had a prior role as ambassador for APEC. But I'm wondering if you can describe what you think that U.S. priorities are likely to be for this year's APEC. And maybe you can put it into a little bit of historical context of how that might have evolved over time, or how it might be different this year from other years.
Sure. And Scott, thank you to you and KEI for having me today. And Monica, great to see you, and I'm glad that NC APEC is leading the charge here. Just for a comment on Korea hosting this year and the challenges of it. My view of this is that really only Korea could have had a good APEC with the first 6 or 7 months of the year without a presidential leadership and a lot of real difficulty, and the U.S. and China trading trade blows rather fiercely right up until the day of the meeting. I expect that we'll look back on the APEC meeting at the end of this month as a success, and that'll be because of the dynamism of the Korean government and the Korean people in these difficult circumstances, many of which are caused by things well beyond the writ of the Korean government itself. And the other thing I'd like to say about Korea is, in 7 years I went to APEC meetings. You guys gave out the best handbag, and I still use it every day. That's an important accomplishment in and of itself. But this year, Scott, to your question, I think and it's not so much uncomfortable for me as it is for the U.S. government not here to defend themselves. But I expect the U.S. priorities on APEC to be primarily consistent with their broader priorities on international economic policy right now, which are framed in bilateral, transactional, and win-lose or trade-focused terms. So the U.S. has been attempting to, and with some success, negotiate bilateral agreements with pretty much all the APEC members, not every single one, but most of them, and has reached a few agreements, has other economies have not reached an agreement, and partly that's a matter of timing, partly that's a matter of substance, partly it's a matter of misplaced strategy, but that will be the focus. So, which sets up the United States specifically to be in an uncomfortable position at APEC, where the U.S. will be driving this bilateral agenda using APEC as a venue, and the rest of the APEC economies will be perhaps responding to that, perhaps also doing their own bilateral business, both geopolitical and economic, at the forum, but also talking about long-term APEC issues. I actually expect the U.S., I'd like to be pleasantly surprised, but I expect the U.S. to be largely silent on the major APEC initiatives that are being driven and which are, reasonably substantive, not revolutionary, but this work on AI, the work on demographic impact on economies and responding to that is original, and it's new and it's interesting, and a lot of the APEC economies will be really delving into that. I kind of expect it to be an afterthought for the United States.
Let me go back to Monica and maybe have you say a little bit more about those themes of AI and demographic challenges, in particular as you anticipate any potential outcomes or agreements or ways in which either the CEOs and leaders might uniquely interact with those issues.
That one for
No,
me.
that's for Monica. Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
for me. Okay. No, I think everybody on the panel would have a good answer to this one. So I hope everybody gets to weigh in. No, I think what APEC does particularly well are these issues that don't have a lot of established guardrails and sort of the new issues on the horizon. And it's a way to sort of talk amongst these economies about how to move forward. And AI is one of those issues. And a lot of issues over time have kind of come and gone on that agenda for APEC of sort of emerging issues that are ripe for sort of consultation and conversation that APEC allows you to do rather than a sort of prescriptive, let's come up with a set of rules on this and make a treaty that everybody has to agree to. It's time for exploration and trying to find out more about how this is going to impact the different economies. And if you can imagine the impact of AI on an economy like Brunei or Papua New Guinea or Australia or China, United States. I mean, every different APEC economy is going to have an impact from AI, but it's likely to be very different. And I think it's a good time for APEC's way of moving forward on these issues in a way that is cooperative and hopefully that has this economic and technical cooperation element to it. I think AI is really ripe for that. But both Sarah and Kurt know a lot more about what they're coming out with at the end of the month here.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll just follow up and ask, in particular, Kurt and Sarah, if you can provide some very specific ways in which AI might reverberate as an issue, especially among these countries with very different backgrounds and exposures to that sector, because it does seem like a frontier issue for all of us, and we're constantly hearing about it. But how do you think that conversation is playing out, or what ways in which might we see it coalesce in the context of these discussions in Korea? Sarah, maybe I'll turn to you first.
Since we always call APEC the incubator of ideas, and then the agreements in APEC, it's not binding over the member economies. So that means we are more free, and member economies are more free to share the experiences, knowledge, and information, and then coordinating policy responses to common challenges in the region. And then AI is the newest challenge to every member economies. And then there are a lot of discussions going on the international economic organizations, but APEC is the right place where we launch the discussion how we'd like to respond to challenges posed by AI. I think that's the nature of the forum. Korea tried to make use of and make the best out of the discussion among the member economies. And then I just like to point out that that's why that's why the AI is one of the two key deliverables of APEC's co-steer by Korea. And then we are working on the standalone leader statement on AI as a key outcome of the leaders meeting at the end of this month.
Okay. And Kurt?
So I'm not privy to the negotiations around the leader statement, but my expectation is that among the different types of AI issues, there are some where this year's meeting could be quite interesting and relevant and help set a direction, and others where it might be more difficult. On the difficult end of the spectrum, I would put AI governance and questions about data sovereignty, AI sovereignty, who's in charge of it, is it the private sector, is it government, and who makes those decisions? Those are quite thorny questions. My company, the Asia Group, you can go online and see a report that we did on this some months back and describing the differences of opinion in that area. Next in line would be questions around privacy. And how AI impacts the individual. And there, maybe we could expect some useful language, or at least language that everyone can agree to that's fairly vanilla, that says it's an important question and we should continue to study it. Then there's questions of AI safety, and I would expect the same sort of thing there. It's important that AI be safe. It's important that we not let machines make major decisions for humankind. Language like that would be expected. It's been done before, but it would be good to have the APEC economies reaffirming that. And then finally, the area where I would expect to see the most progress, and I think this is what Korea has been focusing on in the chair, is access to AI, inclusion of more people from more of the APEC economies in AI capabilities as they emerge, mostly in the private sector, and both in terms of training, skilling up of individuals, and then material commercial access to AI-related platforms. Conversation around that and the core principles around that could be a very fruitful area.
I want to turn to you, Sarah, and ask about one particular initiative that caught my eye, which was, I guess what they're calling the Jeju Initiative, and it's really about promoting support for startups across the region. And that seems interesting and challenging. And so I'm wondering, what do you think is the anticipated significance of that particular initiative in terms of promoting startup culture and maybe promoting common or shared regulatory approaches related to cultivation of startup cultures in all of these countries?
Okay. Before answering your question, can I go back to AI and further elaborate after listening to what Kurt said about the AI initiatives, what Korea tried to do, our discussions on AI in the context of APEC is we do not duplicate the discussions on any other international arena. So we're not going to discuss the AI governance or safety, these issues, but we rather try to focus on what APEC can do. So the Korea's proposal on the APEC AI initiative is built around what we call the ABC goals. A for advancing a strategic approach to AI transformation, B for building AI capacities at every level, and C for cultivating an investment ecosystem that supports sustainable AI infrastructure. So and then to reflect a wide range of perspectives into this initiative, we held a public-private dialogue in August where industry partners shared valuable insights that will feed into leaders' discussion later this year. So unfortunately, case is not here, but the U.S.'s input and proposals were being very valuable, shaping our discussions coming along with this AI initiative. And Jeju Initiative, I didn't know that we had a Jeju Initiative until Scott told me about, but we had the SME ministerial meeting in last month in Jeju Island, and then the Jeju Initiative on APEC Startup Alliance is a key milestone adopted at that ministerial meeting. We aim to connect startup ecosystems across the economies, linking government, startups, investors, accelerators, and create platforms for collaboration, best practice sharing, and innovative-led growth. So there are a couple of components under the initiative we've set out to key activities to strengthen startup collaboration in the region. First, we are going to launch APEC Startup Alliance Forum, an annual gathering that brings together startups, investors, policymakers to share ideas, explore partnerships, and exchange best practices. Second, we're building an online information sharing platform to connect APEC economies and provides easy access to data on startup ecosystems from from policy frameworks and investor networks to incubator and accelerator programs. And third, we will establish the APEC Startup Network, a standing community, keep this collaboration active and ongoing. And the APEC SME Innovation Center, which was established as part of Daegu initiative in 2005 when Korea hosted APEC leaders meeting last time. That very innovation center will coordinate and manage these efforts. So we've been building on our own legacy to further startup coordination, cooperation in the region.
I want to go back to Kurt. I think you already mentioned the elephant in the room if we're talking about APEC. And I'm actually going to turn to Monica first to respond to this. But Monica, how do you see the tension between the transactionalist approach and the focus on tariffs that has existed under the Trump administration compared to APEC's historic and traditional role of pushing for economic liberalization, free trade area, the Asia-Pacific, actually removing tariffs? How do you see that going down, and how do you at the National Center for APEC try to bridge that gap?
It's a great question, and that is the elephant, I guess. The thing about APEC that is really interesting to me is that no matter what the bilateral issues are, it has its own set of issues that are multilateral in nature, plurilateral in nature amongst the APEC economies. So there have been times in the past, just history is our example, where there have been really intense difficulties between various APEC economies, either the U.S. or China, and one of the others. But you'll have a whole APEC leaders meeting without either a mention of it or without disruption. In the case of tariffs, because it does hit so close to APEC's heart, trade and investment liberalization, trade facilitation, and economic and technical cooperation, which is kind of the guiding stool legs of APEC. I think it is going to be challenging, but I know that during the ministers' meeting, people who attended said that in particular, it was really helpful for Ambassador Greer to be able to articulate in terms that were very clear and understandable, and provided a basis for his bilateral meetings amongst the ministers in a way that he did to describe those tariff plans and the economic plans for the administration. I think that APEC and what the National Center tries to do is create as much possible interaction between private sector and public sector so that we can provide platforms for the private sector to articulate how these initiatives or how the tariff treatments or how the various negotiations between economies might impact the flow of business in the region. And the administration has been very positive about keeping business flowing in the region, and particularly U.S. exports and investment in the United States. So I think these are still core issues of APEC. There's still things that APEC talks about in principle, and we can move forward on them by continuing to create this platform for the private and public sector to interact and exchange those views.
And Kurt, I'd actually like to have you respond to the same question about that tension that you already put your finger on. What do you think it means for the vibe or the dynamic at the meeting itself?
Well, I actually really like Monica's framing that there are external, sort of outside of APEC issues that get brought to APEC that can be impactful, but that a lot of the work that's being done between governments and with the private sector involved goes forward regardless. In recent years, that's actually been the Ukraine issue, which has made the negotiation of leader statements quite difficult, right? And that was mainly a U.S. on one side, Russia on the other side operation, although they had proxies and it was complicated. But most of APEC moved on regardless. It is an impediment to specific technical cooperation when there will be a need to work around the protectionist instincts of the United States, and I would say also China, in some of the actual substance of APEC. So it's harder to put, just like Monica said, it's harder to put aside trade and investment issues, sort of trade protectionism, coercive investment promotion by the United States, similar measures by China, although primarily focused just on the United States. Just put those aside and then talk about trade and investment. It's harder, not impossible. So I do think that in that sense, the earlier topics that we discussed around AI, the demographic issues, some of the macroeconomic issues that can be discussed within APEC that aren't as directly impacted by the trade agenda, perhaps will be more fruitful. I would not expect to see a major breakthrough of any kind on trade policy, or even relatively non-controversial parts of trade policy like trade facilitation in the context of this current elephant looming over APEC situation.
I think I have to shift over and talk a little bit about some of the anticipated bilateral interactions, even though APEC is a multilateral meeting. And in particular, in the U.S.-Korea relationship, I think the issue looming over President Trump's potential visit to Korea is really the question of whether or not the U.S. and South Korea can arrive at a tariff deal. And so, Sarah, I don't want to ask you about the terms of the deal because I know that so many ministers are trying to hash that out. We're right at crunch point. But what do you think are the stakes in terms of whether or not a failure to get a deal or getting a deal, what are the stakes for Korea in the context of hosting APEC and the stakes for President Lee?
I just want to point out that how well the first meeting between President Lee and President Trump last August here in D.C. went, and then building on that outcome of the meeting, the Korea and the United States been trying to hashing out details how to implement Korea's commitment to invest $350 billion in the next 4 years in the United States. And there are certain difficulties reported in the media, spoken by the senior officials of Korean governments repeatedly, that there's certain details we cannot easily accept requested by the United States. And we having Deputy Prime Minister for Economy of Korea here in town for annual IMF World Bank meeting, and then we're going to have senior economic advisor to President Lee and the Minister of Trade, Investment, Industry, Energy will be here tomorrow to further the discussion on the trade deal. So we hope we'll be able to complete the deal before President Trump's not yet formally announced visit to Korea at the end of this month. And then there are other the progress and advance in other areas between Korea and the United States, and then we'll be able to announce lots of deliverables in terms of security, investment, trade, and technological cooperation when President Lee meets with President Trump again in the margins of APEC Leaders Week at the end of this month. So, and then mostly the Korean businesses, the major Korean companies being at a disadvantage against their competitors because of we haven't finalized the deals with United States so far. So it will be great, but as repeated by President Lee over and over, that the deal should be commercially reasonable and mutually beneficial. So we will be able to do it sooner than later. Yeah.
Sounds good. The other bilateral meeting that is getting a lot of attention that I want to ask both Monica and Kurt about is, of course, the meeting between the anticipated meeting between President Trump and President Xi. It's notable, I guess, that this is potentially occurring in the context of a multilateral meeting like APEC, because it seems like it's hard for the leaders themselves to actually meet bilaterally at this point. And so, Monica, if you could say a word about that, and then any other issues about the significance of the U.S. and China reaching an understanding on trade, and then I'll turn to Kurt also to address the same question.
I have a little bit of a deja vu when it comes to this topic, Scott, because in 2023, when we were waiting in San Francisco to get through the U.S. hosted year of APEC, the anticipated meeting between the President of the United States and the President of China was again highly anticipated. And again, this is going to be the case this year. I think actually that's what makes APEC particularly useful in a lot of ways, is that some of these bilaterals can happen not quite over coffee, not that casually, but it provides a moment in time when all these leaders are in the same place at the same time, and amongst their peers, and are able to talk to each other. So I think there may be opportunities for pretty frank discussions on the margins of APEC. I think that's been the history. And I don't think we can sugarcoat at all the challenges that Korea has faced this year in putting together a meeting that has all of this backdrop to it. It's been hugely challenging, and they've done a really masterful job in moving it through. I hope that meeting between the presidents occurs in Jeju. I think that would be, or sorry, Jeju, not Gyeongju. My Korean is terrible. Forgive me, even after a whole year, Sarah. It's not getting any better. But I think that it'll be really important for that meeting to happen. I know that earlier this year, the National Center brought a mission to China, which is going to be the next APEC chair. They will pass, the Koreans will pass the baton to China at the end of their chairmanship. And we had a meeting with Ambassador Perdue, where he was hoping, again, for a good opportunity coming up, perhaps at APEC, perhaps after, for the presidents to meet. I think there seems to be a lot of confidence in President Trump's ability to, when he's eye to eye and person to person with someone, that things can really get done. So I think that's what the hope is for the Korea meeting, potential meeting of the two presidents.
Kurt, how important is this potential meeting for the international trade order?
I spent most of my day talking about it for the last couple months, but can I just go back to the Korea piece first? I do think that, just to comment, that Korea's approach to the impending visit of President Trump and its relationship to the U.S.-Korea bilateral potential tariff and investment agreement is really quite a sound approach. The Korean president has said, I think repeatedly, that I'm not going to take a bad deal. I'm paraphrasing. You had the exact quote, Sarah. And that's smart, because otherwise there's time pressure he puts time pressure on himself and his negotiators to perhaps take a deal that would then need to be renegotiated. If Korea agrees to something that is not reasonable, I'm fully confident that then it would be renegotiated later, but that's not a good thing for bilateral relations. So it's better to just take time and sort it out than have undue time pressure. That said, the impending visit does focus people on the issue, and perhaps there can be some progress made. My other observation is that if you look at the deal that was reached between the United States and Japan, hashed out through 10 visits of the Korean special minister to Washington on an almost weekly basis, significantly boosting the revenue of ANA by traveling back and forth each week. That deal is pretty much, if you just want to figure out what's going to happen in the U.S.-Korea deal, perhaps take a look at the U.S.-Japan deal. And what the U.S. is asking Korea to do is different from what Japan ultimately agreed to do on the investment front. And I don't have any inside information on this, and I'll try and read Sarah's very cautious expression as I say this, but my guess is that it's going to look a lot like the Japan deal in terms of the terms that are ultimately agreed to, because anything else would be politically unsustainable for the Korean president to agree to. And it'll have to be reasonable, because there are practical considerations involved in terms of exactly how much investment Korea can do, how quickly, on what terms, and how much the Korean government can support it. Just very practical considerations that have to be incorporated into that understanding. And like I said, if Korea has to pay a little bit higher tariffs in the interim, then that's probably better than taking a bad deal. And there are all these other aspects of the relationship that need to be focused on as well. I do think, I also agree with Sarah that the meeting of the two presidents was very important a couple months ago, and that helped establish a floor for the relationship that now needs to be built upon. I'm also of the mind that if Donald Trump himself and the Korean president sat down together for a few hours without people whispering in their ears about try and get more from the US side, Mr. President, try and get more, that actually this would be done already. So that's my observation on the Korea piece. The China-US meeting is going to be, for the US media and the U.S. trade community, probably the centerpiece of the entire week, and around APEC. And my expectation is that on this now roller coaster ride that we're taking in U.S.-China economic relations, with things seeming to get more stable and then seeming to become unstable and then again rinse and repeat, that we may have one of these sessions where it looks like we're on a roller coaster. I don't know whether it's up or down, but in the stabilization direction, coming out of the meeting with some commercial outcomes and not a lot more, other than an agreement to continue to negotiate some of the deeper issues. So I don't see China relinquishing leverage or making big sacrifices on things like critical minerals. I don't see the U.S. doing that on technology controls. I don't see either side letting down tariffs. The U.S. is not interested in lowering tariffs on China. It's quite clear that they're comfortable with the current level. China's comfortable with its counter-tariff level. It's also clear that if the U.S. ratchets up tariffs 100%, China will ratchet up its tariffs 100%. And then we'll do that roller coaster ride again. So it's a very odd situation for the United States to be arm wrestling. And I use this metaphor intentionally because arm wrestlers can just keep doing it for an hour and then get tired and be like, well, we just got to take a break, right? Without either side winning. And that's what we're experiencing in this part of U.S.-China relations. All that said, I do expect them to have a meeting. I do expect that we might see some breakthroughs on things like soybean sales, the TikTok algorithm, some other things which are not, in the greater scheme of things, all that critical to either economy, but are symbolically important and politically important to President Trump.
Okay. One last question I want to ask to Sarah before I open the floor to questions from the audience, and that is related to the Korea-China relationship, because China, as Monica has mentioned, is the next host country for APEC. Clearly it provides leverage for getting President Xi to Seoul, and that hasn't happened in almost a decade. And so I'm wondering, what is the significance for the Korea-China relationship of this handoff between Korea's hosting role at APEC and the hosting role that would be assumed by China?
Okay, so we're pleased to work with China. The host year next 2026 and Vietnam 2027, two of our key economic partners as the APEC Troika. So we aim to ensure continuity and coherence in APEC's work as we guide APEC's agenda for the next couple of years. Just to recall, President Xi agreed on importance of close cooperation between this year's host Korea, next year's host China, to ensure a smooth handover and successful leaders meeting during their first phone call last June. And the two things, President Xi will be visit Korea in 11 years. So yes, it's 11 years. So, and then, so the bilaterally there will be, and I think this is the first time they're meeting in person, President Lee and President Xi. So, and then there are lots of things we need to discuss, like in North Korea, the lasting peace on Korean Peninsula, and as well as other economic trade issues, including the, if not resolved before their meeting, the announcement of sanctions against Korea's shipbuilding subsidiary, the U.S. subsidiary of Korean shipbuilding companies announced yesterday, and then the other issues. So there are so many things to, but there are, and then there are so many issues called for the closer cooperation coalition between Korea and China. And at the same time, there are a couple of key deliverables Korea have been working very hard this year and will receive by the member economies like AI transformation, demographic changes, and we'd like to make sure that those work will continue as important topics of APEC in the coming years, and then those discussions carry forward and deliver lasting outcomes for the region. So there's a pretty much a big incentive for Korea to work close with China.
Okay. Okay, I want to open the floor for questions. And I see one right here in the middle of the, right there, yeah.
Thank you. They're very informative. George
Thanks.
Hutchinson, International Journal of Korean Studies. So there's a lot of things looming, and adding to that, there's a concern. It's kind of a story to watch kind of thing, maybe a little bit under the radar, but not too much. It's a big story in Korea, and that is the National Information Resource Center Daejeon data center fire. And the two concerns that I have, and some of these, sometimes something's not a big deal until it's a big deal, and I'm wondering, from an administrative backbone standpoint, is there a concern that the lack of IT functionality might hamper the venue in some way? That's the first concern. The second thing is just reputationally as a tech competitor, showcasing AI capabilities and that kind of thing. Is there a concern from the Korean perspective, Sarah? And this is directed at you. Is there a concern that maybe there's a potential credibility issue to try and cover for when the venue unfolds? Thanks.
So there was a fire on the Korea's national resource. I do not remember the correct name of the Information Research Center in Daejeon recently, and then it hampered it down. The caused a couple of multiple government the information data. The home pages, and then all the network, and then the system down for quite some time, and I believe it's not fully recovered yet. But I don't think it will negatively affect to Korea's hosting APEC Leaders Week last week of October, because those incidents only affect the government information data system, not the entire information network of Korea. So, but that is very unfortunate, but it happens.
And right here in the front. Sorry. Okay, we'll go here and then to the front. Okay.
Thank you. I actually have the opposite question that you're asking.
Can you state your name and
Yes. My name is Holly Diamond. I'm a CEO and a founder. I'm a startup founder coming from New York. So we build a workforce solution that Sarah and Kurt was talk about how try to increase access to some of the marginalized communities, whether it's the countries or the people. You talked about the inclusive technology, how you would make an impact to the people. And I think that the question that I have, and this is my first time also found out about the Jeju initiative, so thank you for sharing that, is is really about the building up the ecosystem from the startup's founder perspective to the partnering with the government to the investors or the CEOs of the larger corporations. We don't really have access to how to build that relationship, like having this a private partnership. So like, what are some of the, I guess, first of all, asking the questions about how we can try to build that relationship and having the POC point of contact with the governments for the early stage startup companies that we didn't really know about. Second point is for Jeju Initiative or the CEO forums. I forgot the term. It's like a CEO summit. Like, how would you go about creating those more of ecosystems that create a global impact of inclusive technology for people who lack of access to the digital divide?
Monica to respond as well as you if you want to say something. Monica?
Sure, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about the CEO Summit. Just in the terms of, first of all, registration is still open. The CEO Summit process has always been each year in APEC, someplace where businesses of lots of different sizes come together. It's not always possible for businesses that are in the very throes of their startup to get away from what they're doing for a few days to go do a CEO Summit, but it is unparalleled networking opportunity, I would say. And just for those who want to may want to register, it's APEC CEO Summit 2025.com, I believe. And if I've got that wrong, I will fix it. But the registration is still open. So APEC has done a lot actually to bring businesses of all sizes together in the same room and with the governments. The APEC SME working group has been active on that, but also the APEC Business Advisory Council, which is something that the National Center for APEC supports for the US members, has a very active work stream on small and medium enterprises. And they look at various different things, different kinds of toolkits. One was on supply chain resiliency. SMEs could go online and do a toolkit to determine how resilient their supply chain is. There's very practical kinds of things that are going on throughout the APEC process. That's just one example, but that will actually approach and bring in to being services that help the startup and entrepreneurial community. It's been a real great focus of APEC for many years.
Do either of y'all have information about the size of the CEO Summit this year? How many CEOs are attending?
It is going to be about 1,000 people, I think, delegates, but in addition to the delegates, there are, media. There's 12 different international media companies that are media partners of the summit. There are, the delegates often have accompanying staff. There are booths. There's exhibits. The Koreans, Korean Chamber of Commerce and Industry (KCCI) have been organizing this, and I think it's going to be a very full agenda of showcasing the kind of technological abilities that Korea has that was mentioned in the last question, and also things like Korean culture, K-pop, K-beauty, K just about everything, and it's going to be interesting from that perspective too. They really found a way both to bring the APEC agenda forward, but also to really showcase Korea's abilities, which is it's a tough line to be walking, but they've done it really well.
So I do not have information at hand, but if you need want us to connect with some of the officials responsible, we can further discuss after the session. But just one thing I can emphasize that the creating inclusive technology ecosystem is one of the key priorities of the Korean government discussing AI, the nature of AI technology in the context of APEC. So that's why Korea trying to incorporate the agenda of AI technology in not only for the AI and digital ministry meetings, but with education, trade, and culture and creative industries and tourism and everything, because without fully utilizing AI technology in all spectrums of economic and social activities, the AI will not benefit all actors, all components of society.
We have one question.
Sorry, Scott,
Oh,
could
yes.
I just correct myself? I'm sorry,
Okay.
I did give the website. I forgot the word Korea in there. It's the APEC CEO Summit Korea 2025.com, and there's a button right there to register for the APEC CEO Summit. Apologies for
Thank you,
getting it
Monica, for
wrong the
that
first time.
clarification. Let's go right back here.
Hi, I'm Eunjung Kim from the Joseon Daily. I have a question. There has been a report and a statement from the government that President Trump might visit South Korea but skip the main event happening on 31st and November 1st. So I was wondering, what impact do you think this will have on the event as a whole?
Is that directed towards any particular person?
Anyone.
Okay.
So we've been closely communicating with the United States of a possible visit of President Trump to Korea during APEC Leaders Week, but I cannot share any information with you here because it's his visit or his travel plan is formally announced by the U.S. government. But yes, but he will participate the APEC Leaders Week. We hope he will be able to participate the APEC Leaders Week because the presence of the United States leader is very important for the success of the APEC.
So, Monica and Kurt, I'm sure that you've seen all sorts of permutations related to levels of participation.
I was just going to say it's far from unprecedented that a leader from whatever of the APEC economies is unable to be personally present during the APEC leaders meeting, and often it's been a foreign minister or a deputy minister or prime minister that attends in their place. So it's not out of the norm. And I think one piece of sort of relevant information can be that, you know, back when 1993, when APEC began to meet at the leaders level, there were really no other global leaders meetings like that. Now the summit schedule is, they call it summit season in the fall here, because we've got ASEAN and G20 and various, you know, different and UNGA going on. So there's always a challenge for a lot of the leaders to make it to every one of them. And in fact, there's a number of previous U.S. presidents that have had other cabinet officials represent the United States at the actual leaders retreat. But it's as I said, APEC is a really ongoing year-long process, and the U.S. has been actively engaged all year at the cabinet and senior levels. And I think the president, at least the plan, or what you hear is the plan, is he's going to be coming to Gyeongju. I think is a tremendous advance, and hopefully speaking to the CEO Summit, that would be terrific.
Kurt, do you have any additional observations?
Well, we could have a trivia quiz and see who can name which U.S. president went to every APEC while he was president.
Kurt thinks he's going to win.
No takers? That's George Bush, W. Bush, yeah. Interesting factoid. Every other president has missed one or two. And so we'll see what happens this year. It will be, even if President Trump doesn't stay for the full week, he will, I expect, be in Korea and having a bilateral meeting with President Xi, with President Lee, probably with other leaders, and then hopefully he does some APEC-related activities as well. As a taxpayer, I would prefer that he stay for the whole thing. I think it's a good way to show the flag for the United States, and also it's a really good opportunity for the U.S. leader to listen to other leaders in person, speak about their economy's problems and issues, and it's a very important opportunity to talk to really smart people from around the region. So I hope that he stays as long as possible. The only acceptable excuse in my mind would be that if he came back and solved the shutdown, hopefully it gets done before that, but it'd be nice to have people trick-or-treating on that Friday or Saturday with paychecks to pay for the candy and not be doing it without pay.
Okay. I think we had one question up here, right here, front.
Well, first of all, thank you for the talk. It's very informative. I'm Jordan. I'm an AU student studying U.S. foreign policy and national security. And my question is much more, I guess, substantive with regards to sustainability. I was wondering if first of all, how Korea was able to handle sustainable use of AI, and how the developing nations within APEC could be able to draw lessons from South Korea in a way that doesn't upset their economies, because I imagine, as we all know, AI consumption is very intensive on electric grids, especially nascent ones. Thank you.
Any takers?
I don't have an answer for what Korea is doing. I think every economy is now trying to revise electricity consumption forecasts based on AI-related demand. AI is not more important than refrigerators and dryers, and not even close to being as important as air conditioning and other uses of electricity, including electric vehicles, and other forms of electric transportation. But it is growing rapidly, and so they need to come up with ways to produce more electricity without a detrimental impact on the environment. I think Korea and every other economy in the region understands that and is trying to figure it out. They've all got different approaches to their energy mix. I'm not aware that is a, Monica or Sarah, maybe you know that is a specific work stream in APEC this year addressed to, there's a sustainability agenda that's been going on for years, but I'm not aware that there's one that's specifically focused on the impact of AI on sustainability.
I'm not aware. Monica, do you have any?
Oh, please.
Yes.
Well, just
I'm
that
not
the
aware
APEC Business
of
Advisory
any-
Council
yes,
is working on it too.
Not aware of any work stream we're working on this year regarding AI and the sustainability, but in general, we've been working very hard for sustainable developments in the APEC region, so we try to provide as much the capacity building to developing countries in the region, and they can reap the benefits of technological development as like a Korea. So not particularly knowledgeable about the AI and sustainability, but I believe that could be one of the many components being discussed in the context of APEC and AI.
I think that I would add that that is something that the APEC Business Advisory Council is hoping to put on ministers and leaders and agenda for both the energy working group, and really AI has been woven into every aspect of APEC this year: health and energy and transportation, everything. So it's that question of what will it take to fuel AI in a way that what electricity it will use versus what can it bring to bear on that conversation is how you manage electricity better so that you can use it in all these different ways. So I think that it's a sort of one of those new areas that APEC has some room to be a test laboratory for, I think, on AI and energy.
Can I just foot stomp on it that as Monica is saying, there are these mechanisms within APEC for the private sector to drive the agenda, either through ABAC or through the working groups. And this is a prime example where there are corporations answerable to shareholders and investors that are concerned about their own reputation as major demand source for electricity going forward, and trying to figure out how to position themselves politically or operationally in that regard. And then APEC is a nice venue to try and explore what some of the agenda might be for governments in that regard. So you're probably a year or two ahead of the curve here in asking that question, but it shows that there is a response mechanism through APEC that's quite useful.
Okay, we got one here? Okay, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Isla Lundberry. I'm a graduate student in Democracy and Governance at Georgetown University. So in Japan, the premiership is currently up in the air with Takaichi's election to be leader of the Liberal Democratic Party, now up in limbo with the defection of its coalition partner. How do you expect the uncertainty regarding the leadership of Japan to affect the dynamic of APEC this year and Japan's cooperation with the member economies?
You want to comment on that? Do you want me to?
Yeah, please.
The October 21st, there will be an attempt for Mrs. Takaichi to form a government in the Diet. It appears that it could likely to succeed, somewhere between likely and probably, but definitely not certainly. And there is a possibility that someone else could emerge from that process. And there's also a possibility that there'll be no solution on October 21st. So no one really knows. She's negotiating it right now with the various parties. However, just based on experience and going back to the conversation we had about the United States participation, I would expect that if Prime Minister Ishiba is still Prime Minister at the end of the month, he'll go to APEC and will do a fine job of representing Japan and explaining its priorities and participating in the meetings, perhaps in a somewhat reflective sense, since he's not going to be Prime Minister much longer after that. But he could do that, or be more exciting to have a new Japanese Prime Minister, trying out their new role in a room full of more experienced leaders. So I'm not answering your question because I don't know the answer.
Monica, do you want to add anything on that?
No, I just, again, in past years, there have been changes of political leadership in various APEC economies. And I remember once we were there waiting to figure out who from New Zealand was going to be there. So I think that's just part of the interesting, as I agree with Kurt, that it would be really interesting and terrific if a new Japanese Prime Minister could be present there. It's a great opportunity to sort of, meet everybody on the global stage in a way that's in the region and close to home.
It's just one thing, the close collaboration, active engagement, support of our close friends Japan will be very instrumental for the success of Korea's host year in APEC. And then we'll be very happy to have a new Japanese Prime Minister for APEC Leaders Week. But at the same time, if we are going to have a chance to host Prime Minister Ishiba once again in Korea, that will be terrific too.
Any additional questions? We've got one over here. We're on this side.
Great. Thank you, Ambassador Tong and Minister An and President Whaley for speaking us at KAI. My name is Johan. I'm a researcher at KAI here, also a graduate student at Georgetown University. One of the questions I wanted to ask the speaker is with the rise of a multilateral economic frameworks like CPTPP and IPF, what can do APEC to do sort of reaffirm its central role as a cooperative, consensus-based forum for trade and innovation in the Asia-Pacific?
Sarah, that sounds like it's directed to you.
So as Monica stressed out earlier in her remarks, the free trade, investments, and support for multilateral trading system, it's the very foundation of APEC in 1990s. And then I'm very proud and then happy I can say that we agreed on the joint statement by consensus at the Minister for responsible for trade meeting in Jeju in May. We weren't sure we will be able to reach a consensus this year's joint statement on international trade, given that what happened leading up to the events this year. And then I guess that gives some kind of comfort and daylight to the global market that we will be able to agree upon something. And then for the Leaders Week, and then we are working on several outcome documents right now, the Leaders Declaration and then the ministerial statements as the coalescing all the work on of APEC this year. Then I hope we'll be able to reaffirm our commitment to free trade investments and multilateral trading system. And then if not, at least we will be able to shed some light on the importance of the free, fair, reciprocal, or the predict, and then other trade, and then the resilient and the economic environment for all the member economies of the APEC.
Any last questions? One over here. I think this will probably be our last one.
Hi, Ari Astaire, Director of Communications at KEI, and a proud Seattleite. Go Mariners! Saw the vest at the beginning of the event. So I just very briefly, and this can be lighthearted. I'm just wondering from each of you, what is a big surprise to you going into APEC? What will be a big surprise if it happens? Maybe this is something you've read in a headline or you've discussed with colleagues that you think is implausible, but it could happen.
I'm gonna.
I hope not.
Yeah. I was gonna.
I hope not. And then, as the Kurt said in the beginning of this discussion, that the Korea only can do it without the actual leadership of the government in place for half of the year, and they still can put it off the successful Leaders Week later half of the year. So, and with all the things happened during this year, we will be able to have a very successful, smooth, and the APEC Leaders Week in 2 weeks, I think, yes. And then no surprise, please.
So Sarah says that the surprise is that everything goes well. And actually, that's not a surprise. So
yes, for Korea's case, that's not a surprise.
Yeah.
That's just a given.
Yeah, okay, good. Monica?
Oh, I was afraid you'd come to me next. I think there'll be some very good surprises out of the CEO summit. Not a surprise that I would say that, but it's the interesting things that come out of some of the speakers and some new, fresh perspectives often will sort of send APEC or open up a new page in APEC. So I'm hoping for a surprise like that. It wouldn't surprise me if everybody says exactly what I expect them to say, but it often does result in a surprise. So join us and find out for yourself.
Kurt, and I might also ask you, I've got a last question for everybody that I'll just ask to combine. You can answer about the surprise, but also what is the potentially distinctive mark that Gyeongju APEC is going to leave? A declaration, some other development that might occur? As long as it happens in Gyeongju, it'll still be a declaration, even if it's a bilateral agreement. So, any speculation on that?
Yeah. So I think to me, a really pleasant surprise would be to see all 21 leaders or their senior representatives, but preferably as many leaders as possible, all dressed up in some nice outfit and getting their picture taken together. That would be. I'll be surprised if that quite happens this year, for various reasons, and if it does, I'll be really excited. You all know that the APEC tradition of wearing national garb, as Monica well knows, the one time that we didn't do that was when the United States was trying to be really serious about APEC in 2011, and these leaders all had to dress up in suit and tie and stand in the sun and on the beach in Hawaii and try and look like they were not having a good time.
Who was our senior official back then,
I
Kurt?
don't know. Some guy didn't do a very good job.
Nice tie.
I think going on Scott's question, I think that this APEC will be remembered as a return of APEC, not like a full-throated everything's back on track APEC, but APEC's been struggling for several years now through COVID, through I'm going to be a little bit honest here. The U.S. kind of swinging and missing a bit in 2023 in terms of the grandness of its vision for APEC. And so Korea as a really solid participant, long-term participant in APEC, as you said, the birthplace of the initiative, I think will help set things back on track. And that's how it'll be viewed when I'm teaching the Georgetown course a few years from now. That's how we'll refer to the Korea APEC year.
Okay. Well, what I really want is for Sarah to dish on the designer for the national dress, but I'm sure we won't get that. So please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.